Hello, welcome to my channel where I talk mostly about watercolour painting. So in today's video I'm going to run through how I created this semi-abstract landscape using a wet and wet watercolour technique. And I used three mediums. I used a texture medium, a granulating medium and a bit of Aquapasto as well. So my plan was to mount this painting on this board, and I actually did a second painting in the end and mounted that on this board, so I'll show that at the end. But I'm using that to just get the approximate size of my painting, and I'm just putting some tape around that board. And I've got the texture medium here, which is Winsor in Newton, and the granulating medium is in a similar bottle but it's clear. And I've also got this painting here which I'm going to use as a reference. I really like this colour combination, so it's Blue Ultramarine and I've got burnt Sienna, and I used a lemon yellow to make that green, and I've got a bit of Cobalt Blue in there as well. So I'm just getting straight into the painting, and because I'm going to do a wet and wet technique, I'm just putting some clean water all over my paper, and I'm not getting it soaking, I'm just spreading that evenly. And I'm going to put the burnt Sienna down first, and I'm sort of leaving a gap in the middle where I'm going to concentrate a bit more of the green colour. So I used my tissue here to pick up some of that paint because I felt like I'd made it too dark, and I decided to put the a bit more on the bottom so it's darker towards the bottom. And I'm going in here with my Blue Ultramarine, and obviously I've speeded this demonstration up quite a bit, but I'm using quite a wide brush there that's made specially for watercolour, so it's quite soft. And that Blue Ultramarine is going on top of the burnt Sienna. And I don't use Blue Ultramarine that often, but I read a book recently and they talk about where Blue Ultramarine originally came from, and I found it really interesting, so it made me think about the Blue Ultramarine again, and it's actually a really nice colour to work with. And at this point here I added a little bit of the lemon yellow to that Blue Ultramarine to make this green, and that's made a really nice green, and it's mixing with the burnt Sienna. It also makes a really nice, quite a neutral colour. And I'm moving my paper around quite a lot. This is a fairly large piece of paper, and mostly I don't flatten my paintings, but it can be tricky because the paper can buckle when it gets really wet. So I'm holding it in order to smooth it out a bit. And actually when I did this painting, it did get me thinking that for these larger paintings I might experiment with stretching the paper and also using thicker paper. But that's just the way that I manage the paper when it's big like this. I kind of move it around. I don't want the paint to pool in those creases, so I'm trying to get quite a sort of smooth finish. And I've been pulling that Blue Ultramarine up and using the brush and just pulling it up into the top of the painting, and I was feeling quite sort of happy with this as a kind of base for the painting. It's not a base layer because I'm going to carry on working wet and wet, but at this point I decided to go into the centre and put more Blue Ultramarine, and I actually then decided that it was time to use the medium. So I got my texture medium and I added it to my Blue Ultramarine, and I didn't really add any other water, so you can see it going in there, and I'm just making sure that it's really well mixed. And it does literally just add texture to the paint. You can feel these sort of almost, it's like a grainy feel to it, and I really love the way that it goes on when you're using wet and wet. It's quite hard to describe. I don't know how well you can see it on the paper, but it definitely changes the consistency of the paint, and it just adds this texture to it really that is just quite interesting. And I try not to, once I've got it down, I try not to move it around too much. I'm just putting the camera a bit closer there so that you can see that area in the centre where I have added that medium. And I suppose in a way what it's doing is it's stopping the paint from moving so much in the water, so it's adding these kind of darker areas. Now I just went in there with my blade to make some lines. That will just make some darker lines as the pigment collects in it. And at this point I added a bit of Aquapasto to my green colour, and that's a sort of paste, and it just adds a thickness to the paint. Now I have mixed a bit of water in there, so it's not as thick as it could be, but I use Aquapasto quite a lot, and as I'm going to do here, it allows you to use a squidgy to sort of move the paint around. And I do have a video on my channel that talks specifically about Aquapasto, so I'll put a link to that in the description. And I've made this kind of line here, and I'm going to leave that. And that's the kind of thing you can achieve with this medium. I really like it a lot. And here I'm going in with my a bit of Cobalt Blue, and I'm just going to add a layer on top of that burnt Sienna. I'm quite liking these lines that I've got at the bottom of the painting. But I then did decide to add another layer on top of this, and for that I actually used the granulating medium because I wanted to get even more texture in the foreground here. And that's what the granulating medium looks like. It's this is Winsor and Newton, and it just looks like a liquid. And I've mixed that granulating medium into some of the Blue Ultramarine, and I haven't added any water. So I did add a little bit of burnt sienna to that Blue Ultramarine, and I'm just laying that colour over the top, and the layers below are more or less dry, but that granulating medium is working well, and I'm getting a bit more texture in the foreground, which is nice. So the painting is starting to dry, and it's feeling almost finished, not quite, and I just gave it a rest for a while while I worked out what I wanted to do to it. But you can see that I took the tape off the edge because that was a little bit distracting, and I also just cut the side of the painting off there. But what I decided to do was just to go back in on top and make that blue just a little bit darker. And so for that, the painting's completely dry, and I'm going to put a layer of really clean water on top, and I'm going to go back in with my Blue Ultramarine and my texture medium. So when you do this, you've got to be really careful not to disturb the paint below, so you've got to go in with a really sort of like light touch and not work it too much. So I've just literally done a few sweeps of that colour across the middle, and like I said, I'm not going to touch it too much. You don't want to mess around with your painting too much, and I maybe even overdid it a little bit there. So this is getting more or less finished. I did decide to go back over the green area at the bottom and just add a line of green, just to add a bit more contrast within the painting, but I didn't want to make that line too dark. So I've really enjoyed working with the Blue Ultramarine, and as a pure colour it was fun to put down on the paper, but I did decide that it was just too bright and I really needed to tone it down a bit, and to do that I actually ended up adding a layer of the burnt sienna on top of the pure blue colour in the centre, and that just brought the colours a bit closer back to my reference painting that I'd used at the beginning. And I actually, as a result of that, ended up doing another painting, which is this one here, and this is the one that I mounted on the wooden board. And it's really sunny here, which is really nice, but I was finding it difficult to find the right spot to film my painting. But anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and if you did, please hit like, and if you'd like to see similar videos in the future, then please subscribe to my channel. Okay, thank you, bye.